Welcome everybody to a special episode of the Upwards podcast. This is a bonus episode we weren't originally planning on doing, but here we are in Austin, Texas once again, coming to you live. And I have a very special guest with me today by the name of Linda Jenkinson. Hello, Linda.
Hello, Phil.
Linda is special because she was the first ever woman CEO to list on the NASDAQ. She's been in business for around 30 years as a serial entrepreneur who started several successful businesses and exited, such as the Concierge and DMS. Linda has raised over $350 million, is vastly experienced, has been on the board of Air New Zealand, amongst other things as well. I'm very privileged to have her with me today on this bonus episode of Upwards.
Great.
Thanks for joining me.
Delighted to join you, Phil.
Very cool. I'm particularly excited about Linda because she has really got the experience and the track record to offer some really great advice to us, particularly as Kiwis. We're talking about doing business in America or going global. So it's about particularly relevant conversation as, we're in America right now. We've got even a trade delegation in America as we record this. And really there are a lot of businesses who find their path to success by going beyond the shores of New Zealand and into the big wide world. And so we're talking about this in that particular context, about going global, about thinking bigger, and overcoming sometimes our Kiwiness, which can be both an asset, but it can also hold us back a little bit. So Linda has lived in the US in different places and splits her time between the countries, but lived in the US for a long time. She's got a particularly relevant view on what it's like to be here, what it's like to be back home, and the differences that sometimes we find with those two things. So really happy to have Linda here to talk a bit about that today and see what she has to say.
Excellent.
So Linda, maybe tell us a little bit about your background, how you got started, how your career has taken shape. I know you were obviously born a Kiwi, you were born in New Zealand, but you spent a long time here as well. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I got here because I wanted to build a global company. So actually in New Zealand, many years ago, I met an American guy and we talked about building $1 billion business. And the first question was, well, if you wanted to build a business that was that big, you'd have to go outside of New Zealand. And so the first thing we did back then was from New Zealand, really evaluated the marketplace. And in these days, you call it TAM, what's the total addressable market? If you want to build a big company, you've got to have a big TAM. And we recognised that the 4 countries that were perfect for the business that we were thinking about doing was New Zealand, Australia, US and the UK. And we identified that there were about 80 to 100 cities that were perfect for what we wanted to do.
Right.
So from day one, we knew that once we got our sort of product market fit and core technology built, that we wanted to grow it into the US. So we built out the technology in New Zealand and we figured out, and New Zealand had real advantages. New Zealand had, in the particular market that we were looking at, it was the most efficient market in the world. And so we knew that if we could make it work in New Zealand, and then if we could figure out how to scale it, that we would have a real operational advantage. So for the first, we used a New Zealand tech team out of Wellington, New Zealand. And so for the first 4 years, we only did it in New Zealand. And then 4 years later, both of us moved to San Francisco and started the company in the US. And it took us about another year to modify the technology and learn enough about how it worked in the US. And then we built a $35 million SaaS business where we took our technology and operating platform, put them into companies, and they paid us a percentage of revenue, because we convinced them that we could increase their growth rate and we could take their profitability from 5 or 10% to 20, 25%. Right. And for that, we would share in some of the upside. So we were that's how we thought from day one, was how do we build something big? But we started from, like I said, from Wellington, New Zealand.
And that's a common thing we see, isn't it? Taking Kiwi ingenuity, tech, and proving out an idea perhaps in the early stages and then taking it big.
Yeah, I think the thing is, and absolutely, we've got such a thriving, SaaS community today. I'd say though that what I still see a lot of is that companies aren't doing that piece up front, which is saying, and a lot of them are, but there's still a lot of them aren't, are really saying, where would it make sense for this technology to be? Is this a country play? Is this a city play? Is this a global from day one play? And what does that look like? And actually going into the markets to validate that up front. That sometimes people are so busy building their technology that they don't spend enough time talking about the business or evolving the business that they're going to apply it into. And so, your original sort of question was, well, we've got all these Kiwis here in Austin, and, what's the value of that? Well, to me, the value of that is the sooner that you can be spending time in market to really see that. And for New Zealanders, many New Zealanders, we've all travelled for fun because New Zealanders travel, but have you really travelled in the business sense to get a sense of just how big the markets are? I mean, you, Phil, you've done another startup. This is your second sort of startup. First one is sort of founder. But how are you experiencing that? You see it differently, right? How would you describe that in terms of what this experience is like for you?
I think it's eye-opening. I've spent a little bit of time in the US, but it's not until it's your own business, I think, and you come here and you're looking at the market size, you're looking at the people and the opportunity that you really see it firsthand. And I think a lot of people have to make that pilgrimage, that journey to the market that they want to sell to.
Well, and I'd say the thing that's eye-opening is just to see the scale and to see how people here, when you live in an environment that anything you're going to build is just that much bigger, you have to be thinking about that from day one. Where in New Zealand, you don't have to. You think about different things, which can be an advantage.
Yes.
Do you see what you know?
Yes. Indeed, and you can tune yourself to a smaller market instead of actually thinking broader and more global in terms of how you're going to get to that level of success. And being here in the market and seeing the scale of it really is quite shocking, and it's hard to almost explain. You have to experience it, I think. And so that's why it's really, really valuable to get out here, get on the ground, and many companies are doing this. We've just, I think we were just talking to someone, to Scott from NZT, and said he's looking after 30 businesses in this region who are doing market validation on the ground right here, right now, from New Zealand.
So, in terms of the market validation that you're doing, what is your biggest insight so far?
I think the biggest insight, I think, is that there are some of the problems here than there is back home. And there are just many, 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 many more businesses and people than there are back home as well. A couple of little cultural differences, but so far, talking to people on the ground here, it's validated a lot of assumptions that I had about the problems that we're trying to solve with our product. And so that gives me great encouragement. And there's absolutely still learnings to be had, but so far, it's validated my assumption that I can solve some really baseline key security and privacy problems for people, and their willingness and openness to that has been huge.
I think another thing that the difference of being an entrepreneur here versus an entrepreneur in New Zealand is, you can go out and get a great marketing person, a great customer success person, an engineering team that understands what it's like to be in a market like this. And it's interesting to think about, which is more challenging in New Zealand, and we recognise that we're building that capability, but we're newer on the journey. How what have you seen in terms of talent or the types of people that are available for a startup?
Yeah, I mean, no question. There's a depth of talent here which we don't always have back home. There's just more people, there's more experience, and even not only just engineering talent or what have you, but actually just entrepreneurial experience. You look at somewhere like the Capital Factory, which is just one place, has a mentor roster of people who have been serial founders many, many times, who have real world experience, deep entrepreneurial experience, and that you can just tap into. And the scale of that is enormous here. And the willingness to connect you in and to wire you into that is great too. Something we don't always do as well, to be honest. And I think as Kiwis, and we recognise that, and many people recognise that, but here you're sort of wrapped with open arms. And I think someone called it yesterday, they call it an entrepreneurial bear hug, where they pull you in and they wire you in and they connect you with people in a way that's almost surprising for us. And so I think we can definitely take some lessons from that.
Well, I think it's interesting because you see it sort of on the business side here, where, Kiwis doing OE. I mean, I was meeting with one of the leading investor angels of Austin 2 days ago, and they had a Kiwi entrepreneur staying with them for 6 weeks. And I'm like, well, that's what Kiwis do.
That's right.
He's got a lounge suite and a sleeping bag. So, and interestingly enough, when we bought our first company here, we brought our whole engineering team over with us. And we had what was called the refrigerator strategy, where they'd go and stay at friends of our places, friends of ours' houses, sleep on the floor and eat out of their refrigerator. That's how we funded them. So, there's like that whole concept of how do you Kiwis know how to do OE. They know how to connect with people from a personal perspective. But in America, you can do that from a business perspective because people really want to help. And it's a little bit different than for us. And I think getting Kiwis comfortable with that degree of help. Because I always say about New Zealanders is we're very communal in how we live. But in business, because everyone knows each other, you don't really have to work on relationships because everyone knows each other. But when you come to a market like the US, people are very communal in business because it's all about their reputation and how they support other people. And so, we've got the skill set, we just have to apply it from our personal life into the entrepreneurial life.
It's a really good observation. I've had to really push myself on this trip to embrace that way of thinking, like quite deliberately. Yeah. And because otherwise we kind of shrink back into that kind of default mode of being. And so I think it's going to take several trips to get that really, really opened up properly. But it's a huge revelation, I think, and to think and act that way of embracing and connecting people and really sharing everyone's success.
Yeah.
I think it's just a little bit different, and I think we can all be challenged by that. It's a great thing.
Yeah, well, I think there's a slight cultural nuance, right? Where New Zealand's so isolated that people sort of thought, well, you had so many resources and you had to fight over those resources, where America, much more expensive. And so people, I think, naturally sort of just collaborate more in a different way because we're very communal. But I think also in the innovation world, in the entrepreneurial world, it's like I'm doing this for life. And so I might help you this time, you might help me next time. You're the security guy, I know how to do this. There's sort of this really innate view that the pie's bigger.
Yes, that we can share in the success.
That's right.
Because we're not taking for me to be successful doesn't mean that you have to fail.
That's right.
Means that you're also successful.
Or actually, if you're successful, I'm not, that's great. We always had the swimming pool strategy. As long as somebody was winning and had a swimming pool, we were all winning.
That's right. Yeah, you buy the pool, I'll buy a nice car. That's right.
Or I'll just show up because, I burned it all.
Indeed. And there's just something fundamentally different about that here. And I think the same is for newcomers. So if you're brand new, no one knows you, yet they are willing to help. And I think sometimes as Kiwis, we sort of scope each other out a little bit and we want to know each other and we're sort of a little bit suspicious sometimes perhaps, and then we eventually kind of help people out. But here you just turn up and they start helping you straight away.
Yeah.
And so I love that. And I want to be more like that.
Right.
Even back at NZ.
Well, I think that's what, with Level Up, we're really encouraging is how do we really collaborate and help each other. And I think that's really great. We've got 7 entrepreneurs here in Austin and everyone's swapping ideas and supporting each other, and that's laying the framework for the next folks that come over. And interestingly enough, having been a Kiwi who's been here for many, many years, that bridge between, Kiwis who haven't been in business outside of New Zealand a lot to Kiwis who've done a lot, really even creating our own bridges is really important, and that's where like NZTE, I've been involved for 25 years, but more extensive support. Kia's doing more now. So there's a lot of support structures that can be leveraged. And even that, we had a whole discussion about, I think 2 out of our 7 entrepreneurs here are really utilising NZTE, and the other 5 sort of saying, well, actually...
busy figuring out how.
That's right. But that's part of it, right? It's, I think, Kiwis, we tend to be a bit too independent. And that is a strength but a weakness in this way. And so really figuring out how to support, not only get support from New Zealanders, but get support in the market,
Yeah, ask for help. I think that's another big revelation, but particularly for me, is that it's we all know this intellectually, but it's just saying, admitting I don't know, I need help. Yeah. Can someone help me and how can I help them?
Yeah.
And that for me comes a little bit unnaturally. I want to figure it all out.
Well, it's interesting because, you were incredibly uncomfortable when you started this week, but now you're like knocking it out of the park,
I'm
right?
glad we recorded this at the end of the week and not at the beginning, because it would be a very, very different sort of podcast. Yeah, indeed. And that is the great thing, is that you can turn up and you can spend a week here and look at what, how much you can shift your mindset. Imagine what 2 weeks or more would do. And I think you need that repeated exposure. Can you touch just briefly on what Level Up is? For some, maybe people have never heard that. There's a few people involved in it. Perhaps just what that is.
Sure. So, I'm a serial entrepreneur. I sometimes think that sounds like I'm a, anyway.
Sort of crime podcast.
I do. It sounds exactly like that. But, when I left New Zealand, I didn't know anything about this whole world. And the outside of Silicon Valley back then, there really wasn't one, in terms of an entrepreneurial innovation centre. And so, what you see over time, and, Wall Street Journal have published this, universities, is that, entrepreneurs typically take 3 times before they really get successful, to build the skills as well as to learn the tricks of the trade, i.e. how to, get a monetary reward for the effort that you put in. And having spent sort of 35 years doing that, my sort of give back is to sort of come to entrepreneurs and sort of challenge myself to say, well, how can I take first-time entrepreneurs and speed up that learning so that they're able to be successful earlier in their career? And so Level Up, what Level Up's all about is really helping companies that have sort of hit the quarter, 250,000 to 20 million. How do you become a $100 million company? And the key question there is, do you know how you're going to do it? What is that going to look like? And I've developed these formulas after years of doing it. I've done it multiple times in terms of how to do that. So it's very experientially working with a group of entrepreneurs to increase the learning so that we're able to be successful. So we have a group of 30 Kiwis who are in the program and working together to support each other. And we're just launching into the US so that we have Kiwis who are here, Kiwis in New Zealand, Americans. So everyone gets to share in what that looks like now that you see pods of entrepreneurship springing up everywhere. And there really isn't something out there that's just focused on growth entrepreneurs and just focused on entrepreneurs who want to hit 100 million. And to me, it doesn't matter if you're a non-profit, sustainable business, a for-profit, it's the same thing. How do you scale? How do you figure that out?
Indeed.
And so that's what we're doing.
And coming from someone who's done it before, and I think some of us have had experiences in other startups, which is great as well. And we need more of that. We need that kind of international and that larger sort of thinking, I think, to sometimes break us out of our shell and our little small, we can get a little bit small-minded. I know I certainly can. And so it's a continual challenge. And for me is to think bigger.
Well, it's interesting, because as I went along my journey and looked at my journey, I had these incredible people who were steps ahead of me. And, like when I went to Silicon Valley, I got mentored by Bill Campbell, who mentored Steve Jobs. I had these incredible opportunities to learn from people. And, that's what it took to enable me to do what I did. And, we need more of that. We need more entrepreneurs who've got a platform and a way of helping others. And the question I always have for folks is, who are you learning from? And you want to learn from someone who's done more than you have. And so, I learned from people who built billion-dollar companies. So that's what, to me, is really, really wanted and needed. And so Level Up provides that platform because, the question I always say is discernment, and this is one of the things that's great about coming to any city in the US, that you can find those entrepreneurs and who will give back. Like I'm going to the ranch with my cowboy boots of most successful woman entrepreneur in Austin who's hosting me, and I'm helping her with some things I'm working on. She's helping me with things she's working on. It's that real community, and that's bringing that to New Zealand, bringing that to, that Silicon Valley thing out and about. And I lived there for 16 years, so that's what it's all about. Making you wildly, helping, empowering you. You've already been wildly successful, first employee at Pushpay, what you've done, but how do you turn that into something that you can drive and repeat and and it's a craft, right?
Indeed, and there was some really fantastic, I've learned a ton through that experience, and now as a founder, it's about taking that experience and taking it further, still learning and being in that kind of hot seat of doing that, and it's very different. I've observed being in a successful startup versus driving one, and so it's great, but it's now about really doing that from the driver's seat.
I can remember that. I can remember when I was number 2, and when you're the number 2, you're always looking at everyone else saying, "Oh, I can do it so much better. I can do it so much better," And then you become the number 1, and it's like, oh dear. Now every decision rests on me, and what does that look like? And actually, 100%. I need to think about this differently. And it's sort of that natural Kiwiness to do it yourself versus to have support and help around you. And it's, one of the things I loved when I started my company in San Francisco was, I had 4 or 5 other CEOs that started their companies at the same time. And, on our journey, we would observe each other go through the troughs and the cliffs and the near-death experiences. But I had that around me, and it's less common in other places.
Yeah, I can't say enough about having other founders. If you don't have a co-founder like me, even, it's especially important, I think, to have other folks that are journeying together. Because they are going through lots of different things. There's so many shared learnings. There's shared resources. It just makes sense. It's very hard to travel this journey solo. Well,
the challenge too is that it's not, success doesn't come from the 90% of the time when things are sort of okay. It comes from the 10% of the time where it's incredibly intense, and making that right decision when you're incredibly stressed is actually incredibly important. And I've been there. I've been to a point where, you've got all this pressure, you've got investors, you've got your family obligations, you've got your employees who you don't know how to pay next week. I mean, you've been an employee with a founder in that position, and you're the one in that place. And how do you authentically move forward with that and solve the problem? And, it's not easy.
Those are tough moments, indeed. Yeah. And if you've got some counsel and some support, you're more likely to get through that in one piece. And not sort of drive the bus off the cliff, as we say. Well, we've got some, Austin cowboy boots to buy, don't we? Is that what we're doing next? I think we're gonna eat some barbecue. I think we're gonna
watch some football,
and whatever else Texans do here. I'm sure we're gonna get dragged into that. So this has been great. Well, thank you, Linda. Really insightful, and I'm sure this won't be the last time we have you on the podcast. But thank you for your time, and thank you for sharing what you're trying to do. I really admire it, and thanks again.
Excellent. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Well, look, please subscribe, and comment to this. Please ask us any questions as well. We want to hear from you. Leave a comment, leave a question in the chat wherever you find this. This will be featured on the Upwards podcast as well. If you're watching this on YouTube or LinkedIn, you can download the podcast. It's called Upwards. Go wherever you get your podcasts, go and find it there, and subscribe to that as well. We'll see you next time. Thanks, everyone.